All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the October Whiskey Club virtual tasting. I am extremely honored to be joined by Harlan Wheatley, the master distiller for Buffalo Trace tonight. So thank you, Harlan, for being here.
Glad to be
hopefully,
here.
everyone can put the debates on a pause tonight and enjoy something a little more entertaining and join us for some whiskey tasting, because that's always more entertaining in my opinion.
I'd say it'd be pretty entertaining tonight.
Yeah, that's true. So first of all, you want to just give a quick introduction about yourself, let people know who you are, your background. I assume that the majority of our subscribers are familiar, but let's humor those who aren't.
Yeah, I'm Harlan Wheatley. I'm the master distiller at Buffalo Trace, and I'm also responsible for aging. Aging is part of the job, and we're actually spread out really all over the world for aging. I mean, we have 10 distilleries and barrels all over the world. Aging all kinds of products and whiskeys, cognacs, Indian whiskey. But our flagship is bourbon whiskey, and our focus is always around bourbon whiskey and rye whiskey, and Buffalo Trace is our crown jewel, and we're the most proud of that. And I've been there about 26 years, and I've seen the lulls, the low spots, and in bourbon production, and now we're seeing the biggest boom ever in the industry. So I've been very fortunate.
Yeah, so you've been there since what, 1995?
Yeah, 95. I actually came down in 94 and interviewed with Gary Gayhart. He was my predecessor. Took the job in 95 and I've been there ever since.
Nice. And what was your background before that? How'd you get into whiskey? How'd you, fall in love with it?
Yeah, it was pretty much out of college for me. I got a degree in chemical engineering and also in chemistry. I figured, what the heck, I might as well get both. And from there, I was really looking to stay local. I was born and raised in Kentucky, and I wanted to stay in Kentucky. And there's not a lot of jobs for chemical engineers in Kentucky unless you want to work for Valvoline or Ashland Oil or some other odd job. But I wanted to, what attracted me to the industry was the history. There was a long, of course, Buffalo Trace has been there over 240 years. 1773 is when we put our stake in the ground, and we've been there doing a lot of good work throughout the history, and that's what really attracted me to the area.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think working in oil is probably not as exciting as making whiskey. No. That's for sure.
I'd rather get free whiskey than free gas.
Yeah, me too. But I don't know. I'd be hard pressed. That might be a hard decision. But I'm lucky enough to maybe get some free whiskey every now and then. So maybe I'd feel differently if it's the other way around. Right. So in our basket tonight, obviously Buffalo Trace is your staple, and you guys, like you said, make a ton of great whiskey. Indian whiskey, though, what's that? I mean, just out of my own curiosity, can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, we bought the distillery Paul John it's been 3 or 4 years ago now, and Paul John is a kind of a premium side of the Indian whiskey, and they're actually making millions of cases of product over there. But as we learn and grow and learn more about Indian whiskey, we learn that a lot of the way they run their business is very similar to the way we run our business. They have states, and each state is a little different, and so on. So we're learning they make the whiskeys very similar to scotches. I mean, it's malt and pot stills, and it's all good. They have peated and they have unpeated and Indian whiskey.
Is it all used barrels too, or is it fresh oak?
Most of them are all used barrels. I mean, they do a lot of experimentation just like we do, but it's all mostly used barrels. And But it's just different taste profile. But for Indian whiskey and especially for people in India, they love it.
That's cool. I learned something new. I didn't know any of that. So obviously tonight we're really wanting to touch base on the E.H. Taylor brand of Buffalo Trace. That's what our members received this month, the E.H. Taylor small batch. Obviously, a lot of different whiskeys in the E.H. Taylor line, but was hoping you could maybe give us a brief history of Colonel E.H. Taylor and his significance to both Buffalo Trace and just the whiskey industry in general. He's widely renowned as the father of modern bourbon, right?
Yeah.
So maybe talk a little bit about how he's known as that and what he did for Buffalo Trace, and why Buffalo Trace has continued making whiskey and his legacy to this day.
Well, it's a pretty long story for E.H. Taylor, but the short version is, he at the time, at the turn of the century, he was working toward things like quality. Back then people didn't even really talk about that kind of stuff. And before E.H. Taylor, if you wanted to darken up a whiskey, you could spit tobacco juice in it. If you wanted it to burn a little more, you could add sulfuric acid. There wasn't any.
He was a big advocate for the Bottled in Bond Act, right?
Yeah. So everything he worked toward culminated in the Bottled in Bond Act. And for us, we take it for granted that these things are protected and the whiskey's protected. You can't do certain things. But back then it was basically free reign, and he was really the first guy to bring that to the table as far as, it should have some standards, the Bottled in Bond Act. Most people know what that means, but it's really just a stamp of quality, a minimum quality. And that's really what he was all about. And when he came to our distillery, he invested what he could in our distillery to modernize it and to bring us into the modern era of making whiskey, steam power, and really he put us on the map. He took us from a mom and pop operation into, full scale production. And we haven't looked back. I mean, we continue to grow and continue to expand all the things that he did. The one bad thing that he was not very good at was managing money. So if it weren't for George T. Stagg coming along as a banker and bailing out E.H. Taylor, then our distillery would have been in shambles. And so
wasn't E.H. Taylor?
What's that? You kind of paused. Either I'm paused or you're paused. But anyway, Taylor took the advice from Stagg, and really Stagg, bailed him out and invested more money into the distillery. And like I said, throughout the history of Buffalo Trace, we've done that, and we're continuing to do that. Last year, we spent over $100 million on Buffalo Trace, and in the growth, we spent $60 million to expand our bottling operation and our storage. And then we spent $40 million on our cooking operation. So all these things are designed to continue, because right now our demand is outgrowing our, what we have in inventory. So in order to make more whiskey, we have to continue to expand. We're making more this year than we ever have in the history of Buffalo Trace. And our peak was in 1973, where we ran, 24/7. But now we can run 24/7 and, make a lot more whiskey because we expanded every area. So that's what it's all about. E.H. Taylor got it started, and we're continuing.
Awesome. I'm sure the answer was great. I lost Wi-Fi for a second.
It was a great
so I apologize, but I'm sure you hit on everything. You were talking about, before I lost connection, you were talking about that Stagg came in and kind of bailed E.H. Taylor out. E.H. Taylor was a banker, though, before he got into distilling, right? Or his family was into banking?
His family was in that business, but, he basically invested everything he had in the distillery. He didn't stop.
His family didn't teach him very much then, huh?
Right. Well, he just overinvested, and
Yeah.
I guess profits
Um,
back then
and he was a descendant of James Madison and Andrew Jackson, right? That's what I'm
yeah,
to know.
that's what they say.
That's what they say. Yeah. So after Stag purchased, and I apologize if you answered this because I did lose Wi-Fi. After Stag purchased the distillery, and Prohibition hit, the Stag Distillery was able to operate during Prohibition, correct? And how did that come about? And there were only a handful of distilleries, right, that were able to operate through a Prohibition, and Stag being one of them.
Yeah, really, we have a few things that set us apart. We try to do a little bit everything that we do. We try to do either differently or we try to improve things. And we're kind of a big operation compared to most distilleries. The largest capacity for bourbon anywhere in the world, single site, and it's always been that way. We've always been kind of a big operation. So even during Prohibition, for us, we were able to make medicinal whiskey. We were able to make during World War I and II, we were able to make fuel for the production of rubber, actually. But it just really kept us running, kept the distillery running, kept people employed, and we just never shut down. It's just not in our DNA. And even with this COVID pandemic, the first thing we did was go to work, making the hand sanitizers and the things that people needed because we were able to. And we're just not gonna, we're gonna continue to go strong if we can.
Yeah, that's great. It's a small production, but you still have people hand labeling bottles.
We do that, and for certain labels, I mean, Blanton's are probably the number one hand labeled bottle, and we do that because of the nature of that product, single barrel, and we're not making a whole, we're making a lot, but not as much as like in our main bottling facilities. We have 11 of those across the country where we're bottling, millions of cases of product.
Yeah.
But we do hand label, and we've got a big craft bottling operation. That's a kind of a big deal for us.
Do you even hand label the baby bottles?
We do. They hand label all those bottles, and all those labels are, the numbers on those labels are handwritten, and it's pretty,
Yeah, I've seen it. It's an amazing process.
Yeah,
definitely not easy. So it's a lot of care and hard work going into it for sure.
Yep.
So I think we're gonna make a cocktail, if that's okay with you, Harlan, now for our subscribers.
It's a good idea.
So, everyone should have their whiskey club cards with Harlan's bio, and then we have the cocktail recipe, and then we'll go to the tasting of E.H. Taylor small batch here in a minute. But I'm gonna go ahead and make a cocktail for everybody, and if you have the ingredients at home or you had time to make your pumpkin spice syrup, that's even better. So I love this pumpkin spice syrup. I'm not like a pumpkin spice latte person, but I do love a good pumpkin pie. And this syrup, to me, that little bit of salt that we put in there really helps bring out, like, just taste like pumpkin pie to me. And the reason I wanted to do something pumpkin spice, obviously, 'tis the season. We're in October, Halloween, all that fun stuff. But also, I think the note, like the burnt sugar, a lot of maple, a lot of caramel flavors really complement the pumpkin spice. And we also got, I think in the whiskey, at least I pick it up, a little bit of orange notes on it. So that's going to be accentuated by our Regan's orange bitters, which are also made at by Sazerac or Buffalo Trace, right?
Yes, we do. We have a pretty big bitters operation there.
Cool.
You know what makes that pumpkin spice taste good, don't you?
What's that?
You know what makes that pumpkin spice taste good?
The spice.
No, the bourbon.
Yes, that's true. All right, so we just got 1 ounce of our pumpkin spice syrup. I went ahead and pre-juiced all my fresh juices, but as we've talked in the past, fresh juice is always better than store-bought stuff. So we got 1 ounce of fresh lemon juice, 1 ounce of fresh OJ. We're going to do 2 dashes of orange bitters. And then I'm going to do 1.5 ounces of our E.H. Taylor. You can always do 2 ounces if you want your cocktail to be a little bit more strong. Optional, but sometimes I like to just put a splash of cream in this, like heavy cream as well. We're not going to do that tonight, but it's definitely something you can do. Add our ice. All right. Get my strainer here. Strain over some fresh ice.
I went in the kitchen one time, and my wife was in there pouring that just like you did, and I heard that, and it was Buffalo Trace, and I heard it go gook, go gook, go gook, coming out of the bottle, you know. And she was pouring it into a candy mix, and I said, "Honey, why are you putting Buffalo Trace in a piece of candy? You know, you could use 3-year-old, 4-year-old, anything, you know." She looked at me real mean. She goes, "Do I tell you to use inferior ingredients in your products?" You got me. Good idea. Good ingredients, no matter what you're making.
Life is always right. I'm sure we all know that.
Yes, cocktails, whatever.
Cool. Well, that's it. I'm going to be fancy and just put a little cinnamon stick in there. And then I'm going to just top it off with some nutmeg. Cheers.
Good looking drink.
So good. Cool. Well, now we have something to sip on while we ask Harlan some more questions. So I know that people probably think being a master distiller is a very luxurious job, but I know it's also a lot of hard work. Walk us through maybe like your day-to-day responsibilities at Buffalo Trace, whether it be barrel production or the actual distilling process. I'm sure you have your hands involved in everything at the distillery, but maybe walk us through some of your responsibilities as the master distiller.
Yeah, Buffalo Trace and Sazerac, we do things probably a little bit more extreme than most. I mean, I get involved with real estate deals, construction. I wear a hard hat a lot of times, and work on expansion projects. And but the main focus and responsibility is always around the quality of the whiskey and the production. Numbers, the barrels, getting in, whiskey in barrels. That's my motto, whiskey in barrels. And, we make sure that the quality's there and, yields are where they need to be, and the barrels are in the right locations, and, everybody's happy and, happy at work and, glad to be there. That's a big part of it. We've got over 100 people in the distillery these days. When I started in 95, we had 60 total in the company. And now we have 2,600 at last count. So we have, the company has grown and continues to grow. And, we're growing pretty fast, but we're trying to do it the right way, through carrying and the things that we do. But, on a daily basis, I'm involved. I have no boring day. I've never had a boring day in 26 years.
Keeps you on your toes, huh?
Yeah, you can say that. I used to be 6'6". Now I'm 6 foot. So
Um, I mean, how often are you tasting whiskey? You know, how big of a portion of your job is that? You know, quality control, make it, what barrels go to what brands, so on and so forth.
I don't taste every day the whiskeys, but I taste probably 3 or 4 times a week. We have a brand new state of the art laboratory that we have qualified tasters in there, and we've got about 15 or 16 qualified tasters that do a really good job keeping us going, and because we just have so many batches coming through. But I always take time, and of course I always taste the Buffalo Trace batches, and Eagle Rare, Round Table, and single barrel stuff, and I do single barrel selections, and I always taste the Wheatley, make sure it's in good shape. I'm a little biased on that, but I stay pretty active. I mean, I taste the still every day. We get a sample and taste that, make sure it's meeting standard, and moonshine. I'm a moonshine taster more than anything, but it's a big part of it.
So I'm going to selfishly ask, and I hope no one from my job is watching this right now, but how does one become a qualified taster?
Well, of course, we made it as complicated as possible, but we've got a pretty good. Our book is about 4 or 5 inches thick of all the tasting. It takes about 6 months from scratch, assuming you can do it. Now, not everybody can do it. Not everybody can taste all the things that you need to taste, and we understand that. It's possible you can taste most things, and then depending on what we're tasting, you might not would taste everything. But you go through that book, you test on the book, you have to pass. It takes about 6 months, like I said, and it's pretty intensive.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that like anything, everyone comes up to me. All my buddies say, "Oh, you must have the best job in the world." And I love my job; it's great. But there's things that are great about it, and there's things that are challenging, just like any other job. But that job in particular sounds very appealing.
Yeah, it's a very rewarding and satisfying job most of the time. I'll put it that way. I mean, everybody has bad things happen, and we've got our share of stresses involved. But for the most part, it's very rewarding, and it's really all about bringing the whiskeys and all the things that we've got at Buffalo Trace. We've got about 550 employees now, and all 550 are contributing to making that whiskey. I don't care if it's a janitor or the tour guides or the cooker operators, the fermenters, and the barrel rollers, the guy, anyway, all these people are involved in their own way, and they're working so hard, and they're making more whiskey again than ever before. And the quality is, in my opinion, getting better, believe it or not. So, it's just fun to watch people enjoy, make a nice cocktail like you just did. And, all these people that are working hard every day are producing this product, and they're very proud of it. If you take time and walk through the distillery and walk from one end to the other, which you would probably run into 10 or 15 people, and every one of them would say something to you. So it'd take you about a half hour to walk across campus. But by the time you get to the other end, you would realize how proud these people are of their work. And it shows up in the bottle. It's all about the quality of the products. And you're measured by the quality of your products. And we take that very seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the honor of going there, and the amount of pride that just everyone there, from the people that are giving the tours to the people that are putting the labels on the bottle. Everyone just has this. You can just tell they're happy being there, and they love their jobs, and it's very telling of the company in general. Freddie retired recently, didn't he?
No, he's still going.
He's still there?
Oh yeah, he's still cranking it out. I mean, I don't know how he does it. He talks more than anybody on the plant, and he just enjoys it so much. I don't know if you could run him off with a stick.
Yeah, I mean, I had when I was there, I had the pleasure of going on one of his tours, and it lived up to all the expectations that I had heard of. So if you go to Buffalo Trace, try to get Freddie as your tour guide. I think I'm sure he's requested quite a bit though.
He is requested. I mean, he's probably our most popular, but we have about 80 different tour guides now. Wow. And most all the tour guides that we have hired are, retired, professionals from another, and they're doing it because they just want to. It's for fun. And you can tell because, they enjoy what they do. They represent the distillery, very well. And, it's all about trying to really explain our brands and the brand of Buffalo Trace Distillery to our visitors. And even with COVID, we're just wide open, and visitors. Everybody has to wear a mask and do the, social distancing and do the things that we do. But we're still, people standing in line, waiting on a tour. And we're given, I think last month we did about 15,000 people through the distillery. And, it's growing. So
that's great. I do just want to say something really quick. I did lose connection earlier, so I know a lot of people maybe were asking some questions for our Q&A section that's coming up soon. So unfortunately, I did lose a lot of those in the comment feed. So if you did ask a question before, if you want to re-ask that question, please do so. So I have that in my feed. I apologize. My internet connection at my home is not being the greatest tonight. So please ask those questions if you can. So I do want to get into tasting the whiskey by itself. Coming from the master distiller himself, what are some characteristics of this whiskey that you particularly enjoy? And then I can share my comments.
Yeah, well, with Taylor, and it's just like with most of bottled and bond bottles, you're getting full strength 100 proof bourbon is really a lot of concentrated flavor in that bourbon, and it shows very well depending on which recipe we have. This is a rye bourbon, again 100 proof and small batch, and we just mean small batch. There's no definition, but small batch for us is, we're doing about 200 or 300 barrels at a time. So we taste every one of these batches, make sure they meet standard. But 100 proof is a really good way to taste the bourbon. Most people would put it on the rocks. The majority might, but tasting it needs the way to taste it just to be able to pick up those nuances and compare that to typical bourbons. You're just going to see more flavor because of the extra proof in the bottle.
Yeah, and then we do have the E.H. Taylor whiskey stones that came in your box. So yeah. Before, when I was chatting with Harlan, he said he's a fan of these as long as they're not, what was it? Not too small to swallow, right?
Too small to swallow, that's right.
So if you want to chill this down, freeze your stones. For this particular whiskey, for 100 proof, I would personally prefer just a large ice cube. But if you want to get the full 100 proof, this is definitely something we recommend. And then, always make sure you're drinking on top of your E.H. Taylor coasters here, so you can post for all those Instagram likes. I know that's popular these days. And these are unique. Like I think Buffalo Trace made these for our members exclusively. So these are collector's items. We hope you enjoy them. I would be hard pressed if I didn't ask you about the elusive Pappy Vanwinkle and the popularity of that brand over the past 20, 25 years. Why do you think that brand caught fire so quickly in the bourbon industry and has kept those legs to this day as, for lack of a better term, one of the best whiskeys in the world?
Well, if you think back on at the time when around the 2000, Pappy wasn't as popular as it is now, 20 years later, like you said. But what set that whiskey apart as people came into the category? What set that whiskey apart was the fact that it was a little different with wheat. It was a wheated bourbon. There was only really one other wheated bourbon out there, but they weren't making. And I remember those conversations because I had several of those tasting panels where there was belief at that time that a 20-year-old bourbon doesn't taste good. Well, come to find out, a 20-year-old bourbon's pretty good, and the 23-year-old's pretty good, and it's won a lot of tasting awards, and so it got on the in the New York Times, and started getting the word out, and so it's about the same time that the bourbon cocktails started getting more popular, and we call it the cocktail, the cocktail craze really that happened and swept the country and swept the world really, but. People started appreciating the whiskey for what it is. You've got a older 15, 20, 23-year-old bourbon out there that's made with a different recipe, and people appreciated it. Now, the other side of it was the fact that we didn't have a lot of it. And so the demand started to grow, but our supply, because it was based on what we did 20 years ago, the supply just wasn't there. And, the demands that outpaces it tenfold. So we just didn't have enough, and so the popularity continued to grow, and hard to find, of course, and it still is. But we're making more every year, and again, we're making the bourbon based on today's demand. So the demand's pretty high, and so I always ask people, will you sign a contract for me right now and say that you're going to buy a bottle 23 years in 2043? You're going to buy a bottle. Most people will say no. Some people will bluff and say yes, but that's what we're gambling on. So we're making more and more whiskey every year, and our goal is to meet the demand.
Yeah, and you can't go back in time either. 23 years ago, and
right.
Know that 23 years later, the demand's going to be 300, 400 times more than what it was 23 years ago. So. Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. Just out of curiosity, what was the other wheated bourbon at the time when
back then? Yeah, back then it was Maker's Mark, right? I mean, everybody was drinking four-year-old Maker's Mark, and I remember those, like I said, on a tasting panel, and we had a 4-year-old product and a 15-year-old product for people to taste, and people were drinking the 15-year-old like it was water. And the conversation was, well, can older whiskeys taste good? And I remember as clear as a bell saying, well, look at everybody's cups. Everybody's drinking the 15-year-old because they like it. And, that's how it worked. It's just evolved over time, and people have enjoyed it and continue to enjoy that older flavor.
Do you have a preference on sweet spot as far as age statement goes? Just personal preference?
I do. I mean, for us, when we created Buffalo Trace, we said in 1999, we said we're going to create the best all-around bourbon that we have on the site, and we're going to put it in a bottle for people to enjoy. It's going to be affordable and all that, and that's what we've done. So I still believe, 8 to 10-year-old for rye bourbons is kind of the sweet spot for, everyday drinking. Cocktails is great. You can drink it neat on the rocks. It's very versatile. It's probably it is the most versatile. You get up over 12, 15 years on a rye bourbon, it's really good, but you're, a little hesitant to make cocktails. You want to drink it neat or on the rocks. So it limits you a little bit. I mean, people can if you've got plenty of 15-year-olds sitting around, but most people don't have a 20 bottles of Stag sitting around. So you got to, treat it with respect is what we always say. But on a wheated side, I like a little older. So a 12-year-old for me is kind of the sweet spot. 12 to 15 is what I like, and I might lack a little patience. You know what I'm saying? I'd just soon drink a 15-year-old and not have to wait 5 more years for the 20.
Yeah.
But I do like I love the 20. It's really good.
Well, I was blessed enough to share some Pappy with my groomsmen last year when I got married. So it's a good special occasion whiskey for sure. Let's see if we have let's see what I have here. So I think my last question for you before we get into some maybe the Q&A from the comment section is just what is the future of Buffalo Trace? I know you said you guys are expanding outside the United States. What exciting things do we have that you can share with us? What exciting things do you have in the docket, and maybe whether it be new brands or new, whiskeys of a certain brand, so on and so forth?
Well, with Buffalo Trace, we've always been known for our variety. We have a little bit of we literally have a little bit of every kind of spirit you can think of, and we're really just trying to meet customers' tastes and supply something that everybody's going to like, at one form or the other. And for us, we're continuing to expand that. So not that long ago, 5 or 6 years ago, we only were making about 5 different big labels, big recipes. And the last count, which I just did the other day, we're up to 13 different recipes on a large scale that we're making. So we're continuing to expand our portfolio. Some of it you haven't heard of yet. So it's exciting to see these new whiskeys coming out. I'm very, that's one of the fun things is I get to taste some of these whiskeys that are in the warehouse, and they're just coming along great, and they're new tastes, and people are going to love them. I think our philosophy is we have not made the best whiskey yet, and I don't know if we ever will, because that's the fun part about it. We call it the holy grail of bourbon. The fun part is, can we make something different? Can we make it taste better, or a different style? And so we got something in the hopper all the time. We've got new labels. The marketers are hard at work creating labels and different brands and bottles and all kinds of things. So we've got hundreds of projects in the hopper. So that's exciting. You're going to see. But the other side of it, and you mentioned it, the big piece is the fact that we're trying to expand globally. Because for us, we're not doing that. I mean, we're single-digit percentage global. I mean, most of our sales are all in the U.S., and we're excited about getting in other countries and explaining everything I'm talking about tonight, explaining that to people in France and Spain and Russia, all kinds of different places. We want to.
What is the interest in American bourbon, American whiskey in general in somewhere like Russia, where I'm assuming that vodka is king, and Spain, where I mean, what is the interest? Is there any? Is it growing? Is it the beginning stages?
It's probably a little biased, but I've been to a few of the countries, and a lot of them lag behind us, and a lot of them are actually ahead of us when it comes to understanding bourbon and the trends. So everywhere I have been, and all the things that I have heard through our sales staff, we are starting to expand our global sales staff now. Everything I've heard is stronger than ever, and they're demanding it also. They just don't know what it's like to get a semi-load of bourbon, and they're just happy to get a pallet. And so when we do finally have enough inventory, it will happen someday. It's going to be exciting to be able to supply the globe, and places like Australia. I mean, it's just unbelievable amount of potential for us, to be able to sell in those countries.
That's awesome. Well, Harlan, I know you're a busy guy. I want to open it up just to a couple questions here from our comment section.
How can I get more Pappy? Is that on there?
Someone did mention there is a typo on the card. I apologize. I want to address that head on. It says Shelbyville, Tennessee on here. It is Frankfort, Kentucky. Wow. I apologize for that typo. So just wanted to address that right away. So some people want to know, we have one gentleman that is asking, he would love to know more about the medicinal use of whiskey during Prohibition.
Well, everybody during Prohibition had a stomach ache. And we have examples of the prescriptions in our gift shop, and then, different places down in New Orleans. That's our home places down in New Orleans. And we've got examples of all the, prescriptions that doctors would write and say, well, you can get a quarter pint of whiskey to, take care of your headache or your stomach ache or, your feet. It doesn't really matter what it was. And we did, I think the last numbers that I saw was over 1 million bottles of medicinal whiskey one year that we would ship that down to Mississippi. And, a lot of it would go to New Orleans. And, we were in business solving the world's problems with whiskey,
I have a stomach ache right now, so I'm gonna just
Yes, it does help. Put the right bitters in there. Those Reagan's bitters will help too.
Absolutely. So just a couple more questions here. So Rodney Archer wants to know, on a hierarchy scale, where is E.H. Taylor considered in Buffalo Trace's lineup? Now, I'm not sure you have a hierarchy scale, but
I don't have it in front of me, but I can tell you that it's one of our primary focused, I shouldn't say focus on the products, because to be honest with you, we focus on all of our products. It just depends, what we're trying to fill, for the orders. But E.H. Taylor is definitely high up the list. I mean, we've got Buffalo Trace will be our flagship, of course. Eagle Rare would be close behind it. And then, of course, we got the things like Antique Collection and Pappy and all these different. But E.H. Taylor, it's really, we've turned that brand around. E.H. Taylor left us, went to another company, and then we bought it back. We actually traded for it and got it back about, it's probably been 15 years ago now. I'm kind of losing track. But we got that back and we renovated it. We took the bottle and repackaged it in, retro style bottle with all the same words from the 1800s. And it's really doing well. And we're focused on it and continuing to grow it.
Now, are those like sports trades? Do you have to like trade like draft picks to get those brands or anything? Or
it is a little bit like that. I mean, our CEO got in a room and with the CEO of that company and worked a deal, and we basically traded for it.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know that happened in the whiskey world. That's definitely another thing I've learned tonight. So I have one last question here from our chat. Does regular Buffalo Trace plan to release any barrel strength products? Buffalo Trace is one of my favorite readily available go-tos. Always imagine what a Buffalo Trace barrel proof would taste like. That comes from JD.
Well, I used to say we would probably never offer barrel strength Buffalo or Blanton's in the U.S. And then we turned around and made a liar out of me because I didn't really understand the full plan there. And, next thing you know, we released a few cases, not very many, but we released a few cases of the barrel strength Blanton. But for Buffalo Trace, I am pretty confident that we're not going to change that label because we're so focused on expanding the Buffalo Trace brand and the label the way it is. So I don't see that in the future for Buffalo Trace, but we always tell people I haven't counted it up lately, but we probably have about 5 or 6 different barrel strength offerings, for people to enjoy. So you can find something that we make that's barrel strength. Probably won't be Buffalo Trace labeled.
Got it. Yeah. So, and then just for our members, people watching, we are going to have some barrel picks from Buffalo Trace coming up in future whiskey baskets, including some Blantons, some Weller Full Proof, Buffalo Trace, and then also Eagle Rare as well. So look forward to those upcoming in the future. Harlan, I want to thank you so much for your time tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. You're an absolute legend in the industry, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you for sharing your insight and knowledge with us. And I know you got an early morning tomorrow, so I'll let you go.
Yeah, we got to make more
Thank you
whiskey.
very much again.
Whiskey and barrels.
Have a good night.